Hey, hockey fans, welcome to the 7-Eleven Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Gino Retta. You know, I've spent over 4 decades working in the game, fortunate enough to meet some of the greats of the game, saw them come into the league, watched them shine, and now they've moved on to life after hockey. The 7-Eleven Overtime Podcast gives us a chance to catch up, tell some stories, to relive some great memories, and hear what they're up to today. Today's NHL legend, a 2-time Stanley Cup champion, a 2-time NCAA champion, truly one of the great shot blockers in NHL history, and there's some great stories there. Craig Ludwig. Craig, welcome to the show. Great to catch up with you again, my friend.
Oh, thank you. It's great for me. It's a pleasure for me. I was pumped when you guys reached out, and I'm like, wait a minute, there must be another Ludwig out here you guys are talking about. So I appreciate you having me on. I love. I actually have one of these podcast deals now, so I love these little things because you can edit a lot out. So you'll probably need to do that today with me.
No editing. It's going to be strictly awesome. Listen, for those who don't know your origin, and I think this is really important to tell the backstory. You're from, and I want to get this right. Is it Rhinelander, Wisconsin? Is that right?
Well, that's been pissing people off for a long time. Technically, we didn't have a hospital that apparently could do the birthing. And I'm from a town called Eagle River. It's only about 15 miles from Rhinelander, which is where the biggest hospital was in my little hometown of 1,200 people. So I've been getting a lot of people over the years that are unhappy that it says Rhinelander on the hockey cards. I'm just happy people still remember and they're still pissed off about something. So, but that's close enough. The biggest claim to fame there is we have a big country. It's called the Hodag. Big country fest, about 25,000 rednecks out in the field. So I'll be there in about a month and a half.
The big claim to fame, my friend, is you, because now, like, you went from a town of 1,200 population to a guy who played with Gila Flur, Bob Gainey, Guy Carbonneau, winner of a couple of Stanley Cups, a couple of NCAA titles. Did you ever, in your wildest imagination, dream that this would be your life?
No, not so. And you know what? I was never that kid growing up that even thought about playing any kind of hockey past high school. I was just, I was a 3-sport athlete. I was probably, at the time, I thought I was better than in baseball and football. And, you know, we were seasonal in my little town. And so I was able to play all 3 sports during the year. I actually got invited to the Cincinnati Reds camp. I never went. I wish I would have, but I never did. And I was a walk-on at school, and I was going to go there and either play football or hockey. And my whole career, when you mentioned those guys right off the top, my whole career to me has been being in the right place at the right time. You know, I ran into a coach when I got to North Dakota, Rick Wilson. And, you know, it just kind of went on from there. And they saw a kid that was raw, I suppose, and had some size and thought we could mold him into this. And, you know, then it just kind of moved down the road a little bit.
You end up drafted by the Montreal Canadiens in the 1980 draft. I think it was like 81st overall by the Habs. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to one of the most storied organizations in NHL history. And you get the speech from Bob Gainey, as every new kid in that town gets. Tell our audience about the speech and what it meant to you.
Well, you know, the one thing that stands out from that day when we got to Montreal and we were part of the team. You know, first of all, when I got drafted, I was doing a hockey camp in North Dakota, and I got called into the office in July or June, whatever it was, and you know, Coach Gino Gasparini told me I've been drafted. And I said, oh, really? And he goes, like, are you excited about this? And I'm like, well, I know nothing's going to come out of it, Coach. And then we had a little talk. And so I started to leave, and he goes, well, do you want to know who drafted you? And I said, oh, yeah, who was it? And he told me it was Montreal. And I kind of looked at him. I'm like, yeah, good luck on that one. So So when I got to training camp, all the hype was about Matt Naslin. Remember John Newberry?
Yeah.
And it was funny because the year before, John Newberry had played in Wisconsin, and we had a big brawl there, as everybody knows, Wisconsin and North Dakota.
Yep.
And
arch rivals.
They ended up putting me in a room in the hotel with Newberry, and so I didn't understand that. I think Claude Ruel had something to do with that, but.
Let's see which one comes out standing. Is that the idea?
You know what? I'm like, okay, let's see what he's got. Let's see who comes out of that room. But it was funny because, I'd come back to the room during the day and, and I remember so vividly, Noobs said something to me and he said, well, don't worry about it. You're not going to be in the minors long. You'll be back up here with us. And I was like, yeah, I know. Well, the next day was the final cut and he wasn't there anymore. And so he was gone. And so,
Yep.
and I still didn't know. And then you fast forward it to that day that you're there. And this is probably what got me in trouble a lot. And, Bob gets up and as you know, Bob didn't talk a lot. But when he did, it's that guy that carries a big stick, literally.
Yeah.
And he just does all the things and welcome to the team and all this kind of stuff. And I can remember, which is probably what got me in trouble over my last 40 years, is like we only have really 3 rules here with the club. And it's your teammates, your family, and your religion. And there was a pause and it's in that order. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I ran back and I actually had my girlfriend that became my wife for 17 years at the time. And I was so happy to run back and tell her, you ain't going to believe what this means. But it was like a green light for me to go out every day. And, but it was what you got it's business. And we are, and again, good or bad, I've lived by those rules. And I try to tell our play. I work with our U18 team. We travel around the country with the AAA program, and and then in the locker room, it just kind of spills over, and ultimately, and then that big sign on the wall. Really don't understand it, or at least I didn't until I started getting 6, 7, 8 years in there, and you see what Larry Robinson is doing with you, and Rick Green, and Bob Gainey, and Flower, and all these guys, and all of a sudden it starts to make we're passing the torch.
Yeah. And you had I heard a great story about the fact that you talk about eye openers. And I think a big eye opener probably for you would have been, because remember, you're a guy from Wisconsin where not a lot of French speaking guys out of Wisconsin.
No.
So Gila Flur puts you in his car. You come back from a road trip. By the way, just Gila Flur driving you anywhere is pretty freaking insane. And he takes you to a French speaking small bar. What kind of an eye-opening experience was that for you? Not only for what culture am I involved in here, and how big is this organization here?
It was hard I was scared, to be totally honest with you. I remember him, we were on the plane and he said, hey, I'll give you a ride home tonight. And I was like, no, I'm cool. I got a car. I got my car at the airport. And he goes, no, I'm giving you a ride home tonight. I'm like, okay. Mr. LaFleur says he's giving you a ride home tonight. And, and it was, I guess when I got there, I wasn't shy about having a beer or two with the guys, and it was funny because I spent, the whole summer working out probably harder than I ever had. I didn't drink at all. And I was trying to get in that kind of training camp shape. Little did I know I should have just continued to do what I had been doing my entire life. And
because that's what was going on in the league.
And then you get there and you figure out that, the whole Molson thing, and they're delivering 2 cases of beer to your house every couple of weeks. And I'm living next door to Ryan Walter, and Wally doesn't want his beer, so I'm getting 4 cases every 2 weeks. But so Flower says, let's go for a beer. And I'm thinking to myself, man, we're going the wrong way from where my car is. We're going, out where they live in there. And so we walk in this bar, and there isn't a soul that obviously knows me, but the carpet is laid out for Flower, and everybody comes, and he just kind of said, we'll sit right there. And he ordered he was into the Dom Perignon at the time. And I was, I don't know what the hell it was, to be honest with you at the time. And then I figured out how expensive it was. And he'd always get down to like the last quarter of the bottle, and he'd flip it over in the bucket. And I'm thinking, man, that's about $300 that just went in the bottom of in the ice there. And so anyway, then he'd get up and start talking. And I eventually got my way to the bar, and I sat at the bar, and people were talking to me, and I didn't understand a word. I just nodded my head.
Yeah.
And then I actually looked around and I went, this was the whole rookie thing. He left me. And now how am I going to get out of here? How do I even talk to somebody about getting a ride? How do I explain where my car is? Well, naturally, Flower was out roaming around, doing his thing in a black corner, talking to people. And so I navigated my way out of there. But again, looking back, how cool was it that that I was able, a guy like that asked me to go for a ride. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe he did that with every young guy. But again, that just tells you what the culture was. And we use that word. Sometimes we throw it around too loosely, but when you get there, it's in you, and it's still in me. And it's what I try to hand down to our group of guys. And, you know, even in the going into Dallas and, you know, all the other teams you play with, like this is how it's supposed to be.
Yeah. We're in conversation with two-time Stanley Cup champion Craig Ludwig. This is the 7-Eleven Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Gino Retta. Not long after that, I mean, the Habs were a storied organization, 4 straight Stanley Cups in the 70s and such. And then there was a pause, and then you're part of the 86 Cup winning team. A, you win your first Stanley Cup, and B, you win it in an insane hockey market like Montreal after, for what they had in mind was a bit of a drought. What was that experience like?
There was a lot of eye openers for me. I truly, I had been there. What was that? 3-4 years before.
4 years, yeah. Because I think
you
started playing there in '82, and you guys won in '86. Yeah,
and I didn't appreciate the fans, I think, until the day of the parade. You know how intelligent they are, and you know, and that was at the time they're still wearing the suits and very classy, and which made us, you know, our standards were raised, what you do in the public and all that kind of stuff, at least most of us. And then, you know, you get to that parade and you're like, what is this? I mean, there were people that were throwing ropes, and they were sitting in the lights, in the crotches of the lights up there, and they were trying to throw bottles to them. And I don't know how many hours it took us in the parade to get there, but when you see all those people coming out for that, and I played in I played in North Dakota. We won a couple championships, and at the time, North Dakota was a pretty big school when it came to hockey.
Yeah.
But
still is. In fairness, it still is.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. But the thing is, you're on a tundra out there, so nobody comes out and has a parade outside in February. So, or even in July, there, as a matter of fact, there's still ice on the water. But I think what that experience was for me was how important it was to the fan base. And I think it got you more dialed in. And I knew the whole thing, and the papers, your name would be in the paper when I saw the buses, and there would be a whole bus for the media and one bus for the players. So I didn't probably have any idea what that was all like. But again, I think it was, what it does, I think, is it gets you to understand even more how important your preparation is for the games, how you perform in the games, and that it's about winning. And the people, those people there in Montreal live and die by it. They live and die by that team.
One of the things that really made Habs fans love you, and ultimately Dallas Stars fans love you as well when you won a cup with them, was the fact you make the sacrifices. You do everything you had to do to win. There is no doubt in my mind you're one of the greatest shot blockers in the history of the NHL. I was actually, Dave Poulin works with me. He's one of our analysts at TSN, and I work with him. I say, Poulin, I'm talking to Craig Ludwig tomorrow. And he goes, oh, you got to ask him about those freaking shin pads. Look, they were the biggest shin pads I've ever seen. He looked like there's wearing goalie pads. Like, tell me about the shin pads and why. Why are you out there diving in front of Al McGinnis' shot, probably one of the greatest shots in NHL history, and you would dive in front of it? You're lucky to be alive. There were hands broken on goalies. I remember he blew right through Mike Vernon's glove, like exploded his glove and broke his hand. Like, I don't understand that mentality, Craig.
Again, it was something that was put into me when I was at school. But I think that the short answer to that is I saw how much it meant to everybody, that to winning hockey games. And, you know, and our MO at the time was you don't give up goals. And, you know, it's not like it is now. They're not 6-4 games, 6-5. And that was the identity of your team. And the other thing is like, I wasn't going to be that other defenseman. I knew who I was. And you asked why, when I got to North Dakota, and I mentioned Rick Wilson earlier, when I got there, Wilson would have drills where he would stand, we would be on the hash marks, and Wilson would be on the blue line, and he'd have a whole pile of pucks. And we would have to skate out towards the middle hash mark in front of the net, and he would just drill them at us. And it was about learning how to block and how to go down, and, you know, when you go down and things like that. And so it was there in me. so I just believe because back to Gino, when I left there, when I went to win when we won our first national championship, he came up to me in the locker room and he called me out in the hall and he said, "Hey, I don't want you to think about leaving school because you're not ready." And I'm like, "Why the hell would I leave school and what am I ready for?" Because again, it wasn't
yeah
down the road. And then what happened was 2 years later, we win the national championship in the same building. He walks into the same locker room, calls me out again, and he says, "Luds, I want you to meet someone." And he pointed down the hall, and it turned out to be Bill Waters. And he goes, "That's your agent." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "That's your agent." He goes, "We got no more classes for you to take here. It's time for you to go." And I'm like, "Okay."
Wow.
So that's when I left.
Cool.
And the last thing he said to me was, "Be who you are when you get there." Too many players leave here to get there and they try to be people that they aren't. Do what you do because they drafted you because they believe that you can fit into that. Now you get happy there, you go Perrier there, and all of a sudden he kind of takes a shine to you because he sees probably the same things they saw in North Dakota. So I stayed with that. And those shin pads were given to me as a freshman in North Dakota, and they were used for like 10 to 15 years prior to that. I used those pads my whole career, and what happened was they kept breaking.
I was going to say they had to break, man. Come on.
They were the plastic was breaking, and what was happening was, and there was one game in particular, I was taking my skate off, and I'm like, what's so wet? What had happened is part of the plastic broke, and it was sticking in my skin, and so that there was blood in my skate, and it was filling up. And I went to our trainer and I said, "Hey, you got to figure out how to fix it." He goes, "Dude, I got a brand new pair of." I said, "No, I'm not. I wore 4 pair of skates in my entire career, so I was not. I hate new stuff." So what we did is that plastic pair of stuff that when you get hit with a puck and they warm it up and they mold it around your wrist or around your arm, whatever, we use that. So we put it on the shin pads, we covered up the cracks and the holes, and then he riveted them together. But what happens when that stuff cools, it starts to expand. That's how those pads. Oh yeah, I've been accused of parking my vehicle on them. Glenn Sather, the year here in Dallas when we beat them at Edmonton, he had a petition the next year. Sather put it into the National Hockey League that there needed to be a width or something or some rule.
That's hilarious.
So it was just an old piece of equipment, and as a matter of fact, I am going out in 2 days from now and picking them up. I finally found them. They had one of the teams we were working with here in the East Coast League at the time, Allen American. They found them in a storage unit and they brought them into the hall so I could go downstairs before, I was coaching and stuff like that there to sign them and stuff like that. I just found them after I saw the text message from 2007. There was a text message that said, "Hey, I have your shin pads from some dude out down about 20 miles from here. So I'm picking them up in 2 days from now." As a matter of fact.
That's hilarious.
Oh, yeah. And
you got to text out a picture of that. We got to post that up somewhere.
Because
that'll be spectacular.
I think it still has. And what I would do in the playoffs,
probably still loaded with blood.
Well, it's kind of moldy on the inside for sure. I mean, that stuff is bad, and it still has. I guarantee there's still some duct tape on the outside because there were some cracks that weren't filled in, but I would always try to find the duct tape color of the team that we were playing in the playoffs. So if it was the Blues, I'd have blue on there. Yeah. So I'm sure that's still on them somewhere.
That's hilarious. That is hilarious. Things I'd never thought I'd hear. Plaster Paris on shin pads, and still to this day, I still understand how you were standing in front of Al McGinnis and you're walking today, which is great. So you had a great run. Some big eye-opening times coming into the Habs organization. You had a great run with the Habs. You win a cup in '86 with them. Then you get dealt to the New York Islanders. Difficult transition. That didn't go real well at all. But in 1991, you get reunited with Bob Gainey and Doug Jarvis in Minnesota. What was that like, getting back together with these guys?
It was a very, very pleasant surprise. I had a call and it was in the previous summer and just asked, "Would you be interested in coming and playing in Minnesota?" And I was like, "Absolutely." And so I thought it was going to happen a little sooner. And I got a call and said, "Listen, we tried to make the deal, but they just wanted too much for you." So, okay, thanks. And but don't worry, you'll be here next year. And so that's what happened. And I was super excited. Obviously, Bob, I talk about Bo quite a bit to a lot of people that he always seems to come up and things that I'm doing. And I'm saying he's been my Scotty Bowman. It was just the way when I remember my rookie year. the same thing. He came, we were on a plane, and Bo grabbed a couple beers, and we walked back to a seat, and he asked me, he goes, tell me what you think about our, and he handed me a piece of paper and a pencil, and he goes, tell me about our penalty kill. And I'm thinking, well, first off, I'm a rookie kid again, and then I'm sitting in the seat with the captain of the Montreal Canadiens, where we all sat in front, and he's asking me, and I'm like, what do you mean? And so he wanted me to draw up the PK and things like that. And Bob had he answers these questions. He thinks about everything. He is way ahead of you when his thought process. And so I gave it to him, and I said, well, here's what I think. And he'd look at it, he'd look at me, he'd look at it again, he'd look at me, then he goes, no. I'm like, I got that one wrong already. So we go down that whole road, and that's why I was excited to get there with Bob, because I knew what he was doing in Minnesota. And you guys got Madonna and Hatcher and Matt Tkachuk and those guys were there. Neil Broughton, coming off of everything that Neil was doing. So, and I was now all of a sudden I was 4 hours from my home, and so now some of my friends, which I later learned, 4 hours is too close, where they would call you a couple weeks in advance and say, hey, we're coming. Any chance we can? No problem. Come to this game. And then it basically evolved into the doorbell would ring and said, hey, we're here for the game tonight.
That's the problem with being too available, my friend.
Well,
that's your fault.
I mean, they're the guys that I hang with, the same guys I still do, and they've been part of me my whole life. So, but it was very exciting to me there. It was disappointing from the standpoint that it was that transition period in Minnesota. Things weren't going attendance-wise and things.
Let's talk about that. I mean, that was a difficult time for you, because for the younger audience who don't realize this, the Minnesota North Stars were pre the Dallas Stars, and then in the early 90s, they ended up moving the organization to Dallas. What's that like when you're in Minnesota? You had a pretty good team. You guys went to the Cup final, and yet you're in the Met Center, not a great barn. Your owner, Norm Green, not real popular with the local community at all. So at one point there was like, this team is definitely going to be moving. So now you're trying to play to an audience in Minnesota that knows you're about to leave to go to Dallas, and you end up going to Dallas. How hard was that transition?
It wasn't that hard. I think because it was all new to us. It was like a new frontier. We're going to Texas. Like, what the hell's in Texas? And they don't know anything about that. And so,
especially when you're leaving Minnesota, where you freeze your butt off, and now you're in Dallas where it never gets cold. That's. Do you play hockey there?
Well, trust me, all of those things were going on. I think what made it maybe easier for the players is because the attendance wasn't anywhere near. And again, you're coming from a market like Montreal, and you've got, all this, because after a while you love it. Like, you miss it if you don't have all those people that are in the building. And so we knew about it, we heard about it, and then all of a sudden we were gone. So it wasn't that bad. And I'll tell you what, they say you never get a second chance to make a first impression. We kind of did, because we went into a market where they don't know anything about what's going on. And I remember our very first two things that stick out from the year we got here. We played a preseason game in Fort Worth here, and I think it was called Will Rogers. But anyway, the ice was completely frozen with crickets. And
come on.
No, you were skating out, and all you saw were crickets all over in the ice. I mean,
I've never heard this before.
It didn't affect anything, but when the cricket, whatever, when they put the water down and turn the temperature down, they all froze in there. So you saw all these crickets in there. And then when we went over to Reunion Arena, we played our first or second preseason game, and you got so many guys, and not everybody's playing and all that kind of stuff. So we're sitting in the stands, and a couple Cowboys sitting behind us or in front of us. Well, I can't remember where they were, but they were talking about. And I remember Bratzy scored the goal. Bratzy scored the first goal in that exhibition game, and all you could hear these guys talking about, look at this, they don't even know how to keep score. They only got 1 point on the board. They thought it was supposed to be like a field goal. They thought there should be 3 points up there, and we kind of
at least three, maybe six. Yeah.
What the hell are we getting into here? But then I'll tell you what, once it got going, and the glass was really loud at Reunion, and so now all of a sudden these rednecks here, and we're all a bunch of them, they like the physical stuff. The glass is making the noise, guys are fighting, swinging sticks around, and all of a sudden it was like they knew who I was, they knew who Maddie was, they knew who all these guys were, and they're not talking about Mo. And I'm like, this ain't gonna last long. So it took them a couple months to figure it out. Then everybody just kind of went over to Madonna. But we found a way not reinvent ourselves, but they're a football. This is all football here. And they like that kind of stuff. And so all of a sudden
they like the physicality, and you endeared yourself to them. We're in conversation, by the way, with two-time Stanley Cup champion Craig Ludwig. This is the 7-11 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Gino Retta. One of the moments that really, I mean, they jumped on it like exactly the way you're talking about. What they want to see, the physicality of the football, where you became the real villain. If this were the WWF, this was your I became a villain moment. And I'm sure you know where I'm going. March 1998, and you take out Timo Solani. Tell our audience how that all played out, and quite frankly, the fallout of that.
Well, and again, you're in that role, and you're trying to shut those kind of guys down.
Yeah.
And listen, it wasn't as bad a hit, I don't think, as when you watch it in slow mo, and Timo kind of lays there. I didn't even think I got him that good, but when you watch it in slow mo, there might have been a bit of an elbow there. And so, but what the funniest part of that whole thing is, remember the defenseman by the name of Karpa?
Yep. Well, I remember he would not give up, man. He wanted you.
Oh, he wanted me. And the thing was, is I was already in the penalty box. And so he's on the ice, and he's getting I'm pretty sure he was getting escorted to the penalty box also. Now there's only like 5 or 6 guys left on the entire.
Well, Craig, let's clarify for audience. This was the era where you hit somebody, you hit our star, we're all coming at you.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And you expect that. I mean, that's what it's
absolutely
supposed to be like. It's maybe not so much anymore, but that's what it's supposed to be. But the star was the one that is hurting us. They're scoring a goal. So somebody's got, it was either going to be Hatch or myself. So I think that I just happened to be there first. So then I'm in the box, and there was one guy that was so happy, he reaches over and he hands me a beer. He hands me a half a beer. And then I turn around and I look, and Karp was coming at me, and he's skating towards me, and I see him take his stick and he flips it around. Now he's got a linesman kind of next to him. They're trying to, and he's all pissed off, and he's coming. And I'm like, what is he doing? And I look down and I see the little camera hole. I'm like, no, he's not. And so he wants to shish kebab me. He comes over, and and I'm standing there. I put myself right in front of the camera hole, and I'm thinking, go ahead. And it was like that bullfighter with the cape. And as soon as he kind of pulled back like that, I just kind of stepped to the side, and I ended up grabbing the shaft of the stick. Now we've got a tug of war going on with the stick and everything. And I got it out of his hand, and I handed it to a fan. And then, and then it turned into something else. But you know what? That's kind of where the rivalry start from, right? And
absolutely was
a little thing there. So, and again, I think, playoff times, and you're going to play teams like that possibly in the playoffs, and you kind of set the tone. And I think that's what, again, back to Bob Gainey, that's what we're about.
And Bob then builds a Stanley Cup winning team.
And who did he bring in?
Well, you go ahead, list it, because he went back to the old school and say, I know who I need here, and he brought the bodies in.
And let me tell you, when you're part of that little move from Minnesota to Texas, and the team is kind of changing its complexion, and all of a sudden, Bob was the coach in Minnesota, and then coach GM, and then he decided.
Was Guy Carbonneau the biggest ad in your mind?
Oh, for sure. Okay. I mean, wouldn't Carbo be the biggest? And Carbo's.
We just had him on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he was spectacular.
Well, and Carbo's not. I mean, and at the time, Carbo wasn't 25. Neither was I.
Yep. But
I mean, I can talk to you many things about Carbo. Okay, but for another time. But what happened was, all of a sudden, here's a player that comes from Montreal, then another player comes from Montreal, then another player comes from Screwy's coming in, and Keener's coming, and Carbo's coming, and so the joke in the room is, oh yeah, Texas North, or whatever they were calling us. But what Bob was doing is he was orchestrating the team, and he was bringing in players that played in an environment, because there was a comment from Bo one day, and him and I were talking, and he said, I'm tired of a 500 team. And at the time I was like, I have no idea, but I know better. I'm not going down this road. I'm not going to ask a question, because there's going to be the professor and the student, and he's going to play this game with me. And he knew, I think Bob kind of figured out after a while, I know your game. And because I would just, if he said, what's wrong with our penalty kill? And I'd kind of go, no, Bob, what's wrong with our penalty kill? So I wasn't going down that road anymore because you already got me.
You keep your paper. I want nothing to do with this.
No, but but again, always teaching and kind of getting you to come understand and be 24/7 about the game. What he meant by that was there was too many players that had been in the Minnesota team program there, and they were completely content with win one, lose one, win one, lose. And he goes, we're changing. The culture's changing. Yeah. And so what did he do? He starts bringing in guys he knows that hates to lose. And I said it to some players I have within our team, and I said, we all love to win, but you got to hate to lose more. And so what he was doing is he was bringing in those character players that he knew would go through the wall. And and so that's where the trend, that's where it began, and that's where the change started to come. And whatever he was wheeling and dealing to bring in those kind of guys, I mean, it worked out for us.
Yeah, and it ends up in a great run in 1999 in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and you guys are on a great run. And here's one of those stories I want you to retell it, because you could never gotten away with this today. There's no shot, because everybody's got a cell phone, everybody's got Instagram, everybody's got social media. You could not have gotten away with this. We're in the 1999 Stanley Cup run. You sweep the Oilers in 4 straight. Now you've got some time off. How are you going to spend your time off? And, well, you head to Mexico City. Why don't you tell our audience what you did? Again, a reminder, this is during the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Okay, so I'll try to keep it as short as I possibly can. So our first year in Texas, Matt Tkachuk and I are out, and we have a couple days off. And so Maddie and I go on a little expedition, and we were kind of popping around to a couple little different bars and venues and things like that. And so we walk into one place about 2:00 in the afternoon, and it's pitch black in there. The stage has got, people up there doing their thing. And so I head to the bathroom, and all of a sudden from the darkness right down by the stage, I hear somebody yell, "Hey, Ludwig." And I turn around, and there's this dude with long black hair, and he's got this funky looking beard, and there's like 10, 12 guys sitting down there. And I just go into the bathroom and come back out. He comes up to me and he starts telling me all my stats and stuff like that. Well, it turned out to be Vinnie Paul and a Pantera. And they're down there with Alice in Chains.
A heavy metal band, for those who don't know.
Heavy metal band. Alice in Chains and Pantera are sitting down there. They got 6 handles of Crown and all this stuff. So Maddie and I became friends. So I started hanging out with Vinnie, became very, very close. That's where the song came from. And so that whole thing starts being.
Explain the song, the celebration song.
The puck. I think they call it Puck Off. They got some name for it, and they're still playing. And I love it because our music sucked. And I just said to Vinny, "Hey, do something different." So I go over to his house, and Vinny and Dime, his brother, both of them have passed on now. They come up with a song in 24 hours. So then they are now fabric of the team. And so I'm spending a lot of time with Vinny, and a couple other guys are also, and he knows that I'm a Metallica fan. And so, and which didn't bother him, surprise. They didn't bother him. So he calls me up. I had given him my tickets that the game when I think we closed out Edmonton. Anyway, I get a phone call from about midnight, and he says, be at the airport tomorrow at 6 a.m. I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah, be at the airport at 6 a.m. I was, what are you talking about? He goes, you're coming with us. I said, coming with, what are you talking about? He goes, we're heading to Mexico City. I said, Vinny, we're in the middle of the playoffs right now. Yeah. And so he says, he goes, yeah, but you told me tonight, he goes, you guys got like 4 days off before you're going to practice because they didn't adjust anything. You have all this time off. I said, there's no way I'm doing this. And I hang up the phone. Within 5 minutes, I call him back. I said, what time and where are we leaving from? And so, because it was, and when he told me, he goes, we're going with Metallica. We're opening up for Metallica in Mexico City, and you're coming with us. And I said, I sat there and I went, okay. And then I went in, told my wife at the time, and she goes, what? Do whatever you want. It's one of them kind of answers. Yeah. So anyways, and before I go that night, I said, I got to tell someone. I got to call somebody in somewhere because
no one's going to believe this.
Something goes bad here. Somebody's got to know where I am. So I call one of the guys, and he's the last guy with the team that came over from Minnesota. I called Stukes up and I said, listen, I'm telling you what's going on. And he says, what? And I said, I just want somebody to know. And he goes, why are you telling me? I said, I don't know who else to call. I ain't calling Gainey. I said, that's for sure. No. So anyways, and then I said to him, I said, Stukes, you love Metallica and you love Vinny, you love Pantera. Why don't you come along? And he goes, no. And he calls me back in 5 minutes. He goes, what time? And I said, "Are you coming?" We get to the airport, and I says to him, "Who did you tell?" And it was Doug. It was Army. He called Doug Armstrong. He told Army. I said, "What did Army say?" He said, "I don't know nothing," and he hung up. So we get on the plane. We go to Mexico City, and we hang out with Metallica and Pantera for. It was only really less than 24 hours, maybe a little over 24 hours. And so no harm, no foul. And we make it back. Everything's fine. The concert was a little shady, and here in Mexico City. And so anyway, but that's kind of how, and I know it was.
So you come back, not only that, but you come back, you end up winning the Stanley Cup, and guess where you party with the cup?
Well, I had no choice in that one. I knew where I was going. Yeah, and Vinny brings me over, and he goes, "Bring it, come on, you're coming over." Because I took it to my buddy's bar, and it just happens to be right down the street from where Vinny lives. And so we went from my buddy's bar where all the guys would hang out anyways. And so I thought that was appropriate. And then at bar time, he said, "Everybody's coming over." And so, yeah, and the thing is that, Vinny's got on the bottom of his pool, because they were all drinking Crown Royal. That was their thing at the time. Yeah. So he's got a big logo. The Crown logo is painted on the bottom of Vinny's pool. And
what else ended up in the pool?
It actually, I think it turned out to be a pretty good picture, because that Stanley Cup was sitting right next to that Crown logo.
That's one of Carbo's favorite stories, talking about the fact that they got the Stanley Cup in somebody's pool, but he never told us it was Vinnie Paul's mansion that you guys were at. That's a great story, man.
Well, he knows now. Everybody knows now. Lynn's going to be, his wife's probably going to be pissed now that I said this, but
that's hilarious. That is just a spectacular story. Where are your Stanley Cup rings today?
In Wisconsin. I don't. I think in the beginning I wore them, and then they're so nice, and places I go, you don't need to wear them there. It's just going to invite trouble. So, but I try to get them on once in a while. Like I may even wear one of them tonight, and I know it's broadcast, but tonight is Game 3 here in Dallas. So I may wear one to the game tonight. So we'll see.
Are you still loving life? I know you were involved in the Dallas Stars broadcast for years. Now you're watching what they're able to do now, and you got into some coaching. You're still doing some coaching now. Are you still loving life?
Yeah. I mean, I skate 5 times a day. I play in a couple leagues here, and we're on the ice with our 18-year-old kids 5 days a week. We pretty much travel 3 weekends a month. We're flying somewhere with these guys, and so you're trying to, all these things that I'm talking about, you're trying to get in their heads. We're trying to help them understand how good they can be, and give them a shot at getting to whatever junior team they want to go to. And ideally for me, because it was the road I took, I'm trying to get them to understand, you may get a chance here to go to a college. And at the end of the day, even if you don't make it, you got something to fall back on, so it's nice to be able to do that. And it keeps me kind of I've just been doing the same thing, and it gives me time to jump on the bike and do some riding. I think I'll probably take the Harley to Wisconsin on the first trip, ride up there for 14 hours or whatever it is. And so it's enjoyable. It gives me a little bit of time, but like today we're on the ice again at 3:00 today. So that kind of gets in the way, but that only lasts until beginning of June. And then we got, the 3 months off.
You sound like you're loving life, my friend. It has been so much fun catching up with you. Will you do something for me?
Sure.
Every one of these podcasts, we like to do 5 quick facts that people might not know about you. And just have some fun with it. You up for it? You up for playing it?
Are you asking the questions?
I'll ask the question. You give me a quick answer to it. Okay.
Yeah. Well, you can edit all this out, so that's perfect.
No. They're easy. Okay. Number 1 of our 5 quick facts. Who was your favorite teammate during your playing career, and why?
Oh, man. You can't tell me somebody can answer that question and say one guy. I respect. I already talked about Bob and Larry, and now looking back, I know how important they were. I have to give you 2, and I'd say Chelly and Carbo. Wow. They were my roomies. I mean, and for the time that I was there, and we were all my children, and I was all my children. Chelly was all my children, and Carbo were days of our lives, and they're on at the same time. So as roomies, that was a bit of a problem sometimes. But I'm gonna go with Carbo and Chelly.
Yeah, a couple of Hall of Famers. That's a nice selection. Good look.
That's who I roll with.
Okay. Did you have any pregame rituals or superstitions that to this day maybe you don't understand why you did it, but you had to do it?
Yeah, no, the only thing I probably did is if things weren't going well for the team or me, I may drive a different route to the game, and I do it to this day. I'll tell a bus driver, nope, we're not going this way. We lost yesterday. We're going, and they'll look around and they'll go, I would say that. And I ate the same thing every day, which I think everybody does, the chicken and pasta thing, but I don't think that's anything nobody's heard about.
You got to experience some spectacular goalies, two of the greatest goalies in NHL history, Patrick Roy and Ed Belfour. If you had to have one of them to win one game, who would it be?
I'm going to say Eddie, and that may sound strange because so Patrick was the ultimate competitor. Eddie's got a whiskey company, so I'm going to go with Belfour Spirits and Ed Belfour.
That's good thing. That's good forethought. That's good. Best coach you ever played for?
Gainey, Bob. Whether it was a coach or and Hitch, and I like Hitch. I have a fondness. I talk to Hitch a lot. The reason, but it's Bob. It's Bob. The answer is Bob, but I'm going to throw Hitch in there because what I respected the most about Ken Hitchcock was that he treated the superstars like he treated us and vice versa, and you don't see that often. And he held them just as accountable for things that were going on as they did with us. And sometimes, the other guys get the short end of the stick sometimes, and I respected Hitch for that. But Bob, the first guy always pops in my head is Bob Gainey.
Awesome. Obviously, you've got some great memories. We just spent the last 30 minutes talking about some of those great memories. If you had to pick one single moment that you could relive again, what would that be?
I would say taking the Stanley Cup to my hometown. The first kick of the can there, that policy wasn't in place. I was able to take it to Wisconsin, and then, which is a whole nother story, but we brought there were some teams from the UP in Michigan. A coach I had in high school was able to bring a couple of the kids' teams down. They got to see the cup. And then to see the look on the face of the cup guy when they called and said that Mr. Hicks didn't need it and I could have it for a couple more days. And I said, okay. And I said, I know where I can take it. I had a biker bar about 90 miles away. And he looked at me and he goes, we're not taking the cup to this biker bar, are we? And I said, yeah, we are. And so, again, we lost it for a little while, but that's been done for a while. But just to have the opportunity. So I had that thing for 5 days. And so it was, and I had it for the 4th of July, the parade in my little hometown. And so to be able to see the looks on their faces and to be able to feel it and touch it and all that kind of stuff for the people that they were behind you, since you were in high school. And so that those guys could finally appreciate it and see it. I would love to be able to do that all over again. That's why I'm hoping the Stars pull out this thing, because Joe Pavelski will be bringing it to Wisconsin and I might be able to steal it for a day.
Craig, this has been spectacular. I got to tell you, it's been so long since the last time you and I spoke. To see the joie de vivre that you still have in your life, and I use that French because you got to speak French when you were back in Montreal.
I can talk in beer language now if I go there. I know bien, s'il vous plaît.
Oh, see, there you go. Well played. Oh, yeah.
I got the most important phrases down. I got that.
Yeah, that's true. Thanks again for doing this, man. I really appreciate it. I'm so happy for you that things are still going so well for you. It sounds like your health is still fantastic and you're still loving life. And listen, it's been great having this conversation with you and catching up with you again, my friend.
I appreciate you reaching out to a little guy like me. And I'm still following everything that goes on in Canada. We know that is the center of the universe when it comes to sports. So this time of the year too, I love what you guys are talking about. I appreciate being on.
Thanks, buddy. That was two-time Stanley Cup champion, two-time NCAA champion, one of the greatest shot blockers in NHL history, and wow, what a great storyteller, Craig Ludwig. The Overtime Podcast is proudly presented by 7-Eleven. Before leaving the rink, order your favorite Slurpee, fresh, 100% premium Arabica coffee, hot from the oven, pizza and wings, a pint of ice cream, or even a carton of milk, eggs, loaf of bread from the 7 Now app, and Team 7-Eleven will have your order ready for you 24/7. If you missed any parts of the show, don't worry. Visit our website at overtimepodcast.ca, where you can both listen and subscribe to future shows. 7-Eleven's Overtime Podcast can be found on the iHeartRadio app, Spotify, iTunes Podcasts, or any of your favorite podcast platforms. Until next week, I'm Gino Reda saying so long, hockey fans, and thanks for joining us on the 7-Eleven Overtime Podcast.